Here, JavaScript has a new internationalization API. So that sounds very fancy, but all it does is to allow us to easily format numbers and strings according to different languages. So with this new API, we can make our application support different languages for users around the world, which is pretty important. For example, currencies or dates are represented in a completely different way in Europe or in the US or in Asia, for example. Now, there is a lot of language specific things that we can do with the internationalization API, but in this section, we are just briefly gonna talk about formatting dates and numbers and starting with dates in this video. So, in our application, here, see, we have the dates in two places. That is first right here and then the second one in each of these movements. Now, in case we are wondering why these labels like today or yesterday or 5 days ago are going to here from my application, it's just because I'm recording this video a couple of days later. But anyway, let's go to the place in our code which displays this first date here. See that? So that we can format that according to different languages and see what it likes here. And so that right here in login handler function, and in particular, this is the code that we have currently. So remember doing this, but now we will actually be able to get rid of all of this and simply replace it with the internationalization API. So it will do this kind of formatting for us automatically. But for now, let's actually display this date here outside of the login so that we can experiment a little bit with this API without having to log in all the time. So I will grab the current date experimenting with the API. Now then, we also need to get just this part here, this experimenting with the API. And we also get this part where we do then actually display something in the DAM. So we want to set this text property here, that is this text content. So we want to set it to a formatted state. And so let's now use the internationalization API further. So that's new. And then in int here. So that is basically the namespace for the internationalization API. And then for times and dates, we use the .dateTimeFormat function. Now, all that we need to pass into this function here is so-called local string. So this local string is usually the language and then dash the country. So Eon, English and then US for example like this. And so this all of this here will create a so-called formatter for this language of the country. So English.us, and I will show you a list of many different locales here in a second. But for now, let's get started with this one. So all of this creates a new formatter and then on that formatter we can call dot format. And then here we actually pass in the date that we want to format. So that's now, and that's actually it. Now let's reload here. So you see that now the date is actually formatted and just like it is usually formatted in the US. So with the month first and then the day. Now English is also spoken in other languages, and also try the UK now or the Great Britain. So for the UK, we have to use this one. So, and now you see that it is different. So you have the day first and then the month. So it also has this leading 0 here, and you see that now it is actually formatting this date and this for exact local date specified here. And so just with this one line of code, we have correctly formatted the date for any user around the world. And now let's try some other countries here. For example, we should try Arabic first, say. So that would look like this. So in these symbols that I cannot really understand, but what matters is that indeed formatted correctly. Let's just put it back here. And to get these different codes, let's just Google ISO language code table. And then the one that is easiest to understand, this one here. So see, type ISO language code. So here go to the one that has lingos. And then from there you can find your own code and then experiment with it and see if it is also correct. Now this is the most straightforward way of formatting dates and times. But we can actually take it to the next level and add some option to also customize this a little bit. So for example, you see that here right now, it only displays the date here, but not any time. And so we can change that by providing an options object to this function. So let's define that functions object outside here. And I am simply calling it options. And so all we have to do is to specify the hours property or hours and set it to numeric, and the same for the minute. So for this minute also set to the numeric. And now we have to then provide this object as a second argument into the date time format function. So these options, of course, we could have returned this object, but I will add some more stuff to a second. And then this line of code here becomes a little bit messy. So it's quite usual to have a configuration object like this one. So defined outside. So as you see now we get indeed the time, but on the other hand, see here the date is gone. Now let's get that back here, and we can specify properties for each of weekdays, year, month and day. So let's start with a day. I will set it to numeric. So let's see what happens then. And now we only get the day and adds the month as well, numeric again. And so now we get the month here as 8. And that is because we specified it as numeric. But for month, we can also write long. And let's see what happens then. And so now we get August. So not just the number, and for the month, there is even another option which is two digit. So then it would be 08. But let's leave it alone. Now the year as well, let's set it to numeric and of course in quotes. So that's 2020. But we could also say just two digit. And so then it would be 20. So see, two digit, and now it would be 20. But again, let's leave it as numeric. And finally, we can even specify the weekday. And here I am using long again. And so then it will write out the day completely. So Wednesday, August 12, 2020. And all of this is nicely formatted, just like people in the US do it. Now here we can also say short or narrow. And you can experiment with that. Let's see what it would look like in UK. So that's pretty similar, but now let's see, for example, Portugal. So that means that PT-PT. So now you will see this here, of course, written all in Portuguese. And the same, of course, for other locales. So for other languages, now in many situations, it actually makes more sense to not define the local manually, but instead to simply get it from the user's browser. And so that's pretty easy to do as well. So let's define another variable here outside, const local, that is simply navigator.language. So let's log it here to the console first. So you see that this is here set to English Great Britain. And so if I replace this here, now then you will see that it will go back here to displaying it in English. So if we do this yourself now, then your date should be displayed to whatever language you have in your browser. So anyway, let's now take this and actually put it here into our login. So replacing all of this, I will just comment it out to leave it here. And now we have a duplicate one. So let's get rid of all this. Remove. So now the date will only get formatted when the user actually logs in. But now let's take a look at our account objects here. So you will see that now in each of the accounts, I defined a local. So account one is Portuguese and the other one is in English. So let's now actually use these locales to display Jonas state here in the Portuguese format. That is, and Jessica state in the American format. So that's easy enough. We just have to find the correct place in our code. So that is here. And remember that we have the account in the current account variable. And so here, instead of using this locale that is coming from the browser, so instead of using this, we use current account dot locale. So let's give it a save. And now I will log in as Jonas. Login. And remember that should now display in a Portuguese format. So now it is working. Now the problem here is that our entire user interface is in English. But now I have this Wednesday here in Portuguese and also this month name. And to fix that, let's actually set the month here back to numeric and also get entirely rid of the weekday. So let's try that. We got rid of the Portuguese words. See here, Portuguese words, but the formatting still follows the official Portuguese way. So now let's check out Jessica. So you will see it look like different now. It is now the American format with the month first. And then also the AM time down here. And of course, you can set one of these accounts to your own language to see how it would look like in your language to make it a little bit more personalized for yourself. So with this, we have localized this date here, and now we need to do same with the dates down in the moments. So let's go to that function which formats these dates. Remember, we created a function for that up here. So that is format date, moment date. Again, let's not do this formatting here also for these moments. And so what we are going to do is to replace all of this with a nicely formatted date. So instead of returning all of this here like we did before, we simply return new. And then again the Intl namespace date time format. And then here we need the locale. And so let's actually pass that into the function. So this function right now only receives a date. But we also now need a locale. So let's add that here as a second parameter. And now wherever we call this function, and that is down here. So we can now need to pass that in the locale, of course. And so that comes from the account dot locale. So the current account is here called ACC. And remember, so that locale is that account dot locale, ACC dot locale, and to return new date format. And then simply the locale that would receive here and then format the date. So that's again the date that we receive as an input format. So again the date that we receive as input, and that's it. And in this case, we don't want any options object because here we don't need the hours or the minutes. All we want is to simply display the date as simple as possible. And in this case, we don't even need any options. So let's give it a save and try it for Jessica. And you see that here now it is working as American format with the month first like this. So now let's just transfer some money here to Jonas. And this is our today still working. So this kind of easier to read and understand labels that I showed you earlier. So that is the American format. And now let's again see Jonas format, which should now change to the Portuguese one. Now we get this. So this part is working as well. This is how we localize dates in JavaScript using this new internationalization API. And as always, feel free to read the documentation of MDN. So that is just MDN Intl. So here we are going to find all kinds of different functions. As I mentioned in the beginning that there are all kinds of stuff that we are doing with the API. So besides dates, we can also format list or words like our plurals. But if we are going to learn about this one a little bit better, that we just used. So you can go ahead and read the documentation here, and in the next video we will use this number format function here to format all the remaining numbers that we have in our application. So this is all about the session. See you in the next one. Thank you.